Here we are again this Memorial Day, May 27th, the year of our Lord 2025. And yes, I do have a few things to say about Memorial Day, just to underscore some points. So yeah, here we are at the Parkway Diner in Stamford, Connecticut. And go to our website, Yankee T News, visit, like, subscribe. It's Tell Tong time. It's only a matter of time, Mr. Tong. Only a matter of time, yes. Just as a side note, you might have heard that the Department of Justice has planned to go after 4 sanctuary cities in New Jersey. It's a short trip from New Jersey to Connecticut, just saying. Meantime, Tina Peters, we're still waiting for Pam. Still waiting for Pam. Come on, Pam. Now, let me talk, first of all, this is what I would like to say about Memorial Day. When you look at the span of our history and all the battles that we have been in, from the Revolutionary War to the present day, in each occasion you can argue that the motivation for fighting and the sacrifices men made were different. In the Revolutionary War, we were fighting for liberty. You could say that in the War of 1812 it was similar, but in the Civil War we were fighting slavery. And then World Wars I and II were trying to get Europe out of trouble. So in all cases, though, you found that the men who engaged understood what they were doing and were willing to make the sacrifice. So the one battle that I want to emphasize more than any other was the battle over Fort McHenry in the War of 1812, because there are many things about the War of 1812 that are seminal for this nation. First, you remember that Francis Scott Key, who was a prisoner on the ship, was the one who wrote the verses of what became our national anthem while he was watching the battle over Fort McHenry, all right? It created the most stirring imagery. But here's what we don't know. The British were extremely frustrated because, that's right, despite all the bombing that went on, that flag was still flying. It was still flying. But we don't know why it was still flying. So I'll tell you, 63 men sacrificed their lives to keep that flagpole standing. There, you had 1 or 2 standing out there, and every time another cannon hit and the men died, others rushed out there to keep holding it up. And it was 63 men, as the story goes, who went out there and did that. So you have to think for a minute, what would make them think in terms of doing something like this? You almost facing almost certain death to go out there is essentially a suicide mission. But they knew damn well that keeping that flag up there would drive the British nuts. And for them, it was well worth it. So you'll find many other examples of heroism all throughout the history of this nation, all to be looked at and remembered and admired as we celebrate, so to speak, remember Memorial Day. So that's basically what I'd like to say about Memorial Day. Now, the theme for tonight is the Obama bubble. The Obama bubble really is a way of addressing the other scandal that's beginning to grow. That would be the autopen scandal. So before I get to the autopen scandal, I'd like to remind you, as you'll see if you read my essay or op-ed piece, that Obama had expressed a fantasy where he would love to have had a 3rd term where all he has to do is sit at home and direct people what to do while sitting at home and not having to actually be president. So he really wanted to do that. And I think in some respects he got his wish. So meantime, the point to consider here is that Obama was likely pulling a number of strings throughout the Biden administration, and that he would have had his hands on the autopen scandal is something to consider. Remember that the autopen was used primarily to sign executive orders, and if there's anything that Obama understood the process for, it was signing executive orders. So to be whispering in people's ears about how to use the autopen could easily have been something that he was doing. And yes, I need to point out that there was what I'm going to call the Gang of Five. And as a funny historical note, I want to remind you about the Gang of Four. Anybody here remember the Gang of Four? No? The Gang of Four? No, you don't remember the Gang of Four. Okay. I think it was somewhere towards the end of Mao Zedong's reign, and he had this young wife. I can't remember her name. But anyway, a scandal was started where she and 3 others were supposedly involved in some sort of little palace coup to try and take over running the government at that level. Well, instead of the Gang of Four, you have the Gang of Five in the White House, kind of taking over what was going on with Obama and trying to call the shots. So just to throw out some names, Ron Klain, who's the chief of staff, has been named as one of the 5. Jill Biden is certainly another one. The names of the other 3 escape me at the moment, but they were all, these 5 people were involved in propping him up and making people think everything was okay when it was not. Okay, I want to jump to Russia, Ukraine. Oh my goodness, have we got problems? All right, the sum total of this is that there has clearly been a serious uptick in terms of what's being reported about what's going on in Ukraine. Now, maybe you heard it, maybe you didn't hear it, but there is a claim that Putin was on a helicopter visiting the Kursk region, and he just happened to fly into a drone attack from the Ukrainians. May or may not be true, but that's what they claim. So I just had to share that with you. So the other part that's a problem is that Kiev put out an announcement, according to the news, where they're pulling people back from certain areas because they're expecting the Russians to start staging an offensive soon. Summer's coming. It makes sense. Now, that said, now we also have another report that the Russians have developed a new kind of drone, bigger, faster, more lethal, and then it's been used in some ship attacks in Odessa, according to the story, whether it's true or not. And then another piece I need to share with you, which we put up there. Let me see if I can find the reference here quickly. Yes. So there's a website, Express UK, so it's an online newspaper, and it's an example. If you want to see how propaganda works, I highly recommend that you go read that article, because they're asserting that NATO is making attacks on Russia, which is just not true. There are things that NATO is supporting, but the notion that they're actually doing the attacking, that's a bit of a stretch. So this article is clearly trying to stir up concern among people who may not be as well informed as they should be. I'm just saying. Now there's another thing I put up just to mention in passing was somebody's version of a peace proposal. They want to create this huge, quote, so-called demilitarized zone in the northern central part of Ukraine. Again, I would suggest you read it. If you've been following these issues, you may not be so impressed with it, but it's something that gives you some perspective. Meantime, the thing I really need to talk about, it's this conversation that Trump has been having with Putin. As we know, it has not been going well. Last week I had mentioned it seems to be a Russian philosophy, as well as some others, to engage in warfare while you're negotiating, rather than having a ceasefire and then negotiate. And it was clear also, for anybody who reflected on it, that it's not in Russia's interests to have a ceasefire, because that's when they start to cede advantage on the battlefield in some fashion. Okay, so President Trump was saying, oh my God, Putin is crazy. What's the matter with this guy, etc., ad nauseum. You know, maybe that's just for public consumption, President Trump, but it does not show what I would call a sensitive understanding. How does that sound? A sensitive understanding of the history of Russia and what the Russians have been through for hundreds of years, okay? Their culture, their worldview is very different from ours. And I think you're finding out the hard way what Winston Churchill has said when he described Russia as what? A mystery inside an enigma, inside a puzzle, or something to that effect. Yes, so there's a lot that we find, quote, inscrutable about the way they think. But by now, the behaviors that they're exhibiting should give you some clue as to how they're thinking. And unfortunately, the way they're thinking is not the way you're thinking. You've been hanging out this carrot, this juicy, sweet carrot of economic prosperity as an inducement for them to consider at least a ceasefire. They keep, gesturing as if they're interested in that. But the fact of the matter is they're not. The reality is the Russians are gaining valuable operational experience on the battlefield. They're learning things, improving their tactics. So this is an opportunity for them. Screw how many Russian soldiers they lose, but they are making their military sharper, stronger, faster, better as a result of the conflicts that they're having with. So it's not, the bottom line is this, President Trump, he ain't gonna play, okay? And I think this is another case. Let me just remind you historically that when George Bush took office in 2000, he campaigned on avoiding being against nation building. Well, what did he end up attempting to do? Nation building. And how did that work out? Okay, so the problem here is you have campaigned on peace. And I hate to say it, it may not work out. You have to look at what Putin is doing, what it responds to, what incentivizes his behavior, and what's going on right now ain't it. It ain't it. Just saying. All right. Next, well, what am I going to say? The European Union is another case of a moving target, right? Oh my goodness. So now, first it was going to be, well, you know what? I'm going to put a 50% tariff on EU goods on what was it, June 4th or something. So now the announcement comes, oh, we've been talking. So now I'm going to put it off to July 1st. Well, we'll see how it turns out. But I just don't have the sense that you're making progress, President Trump, when things like this happen. I just don't. Okay, let's move on to education because that is my favorite topic. It's interesting. There was an article that did a survey of parents, and guess what? Parents prefer meritocracy over mediocrity. Who would have thunk it? And this is a real problem for Harvard. Because if there's a university that's sinking into mediocrity pretty damn rapidly, it's them. And that's part of another story. Okay, so just let me see if I can find the part there that was really cool. It's all right, so it's 54% of parents who said, yeah, we want you to choose, accept students on the basis of merit and not on the basis of race. And 57% said the same about hiring employees. Now, 88% of parents support universities being required to disclose any money accepted from foreign governments. Now, this is a rather wise thing. When you have a high percentage like that, 88%, this becomes like a no-brainer issue. And it's a no-brainer issue for another point. I think it was last week that I reminded you, the audience, that we have this little problem. You might have heard of it. It's called money laundering. Normally, banks do money laundering, but who knew that universities do money laundering? And so, yes, they do money laundering, and they do it through the foreign students who come to their school. The parents have a lot of money. They're involved in illegal activities in many cases. And so, buy a wing, make a big donation. The next thing you know, there's a little extra money there for the university to use, and now it's been laundered effectively for them. So I just need to point out that the judge who put the injunction on Trump trying to get rid of the international students has successfully restored Harvard's money laundering operation. So congratulations, Judge. Doing a great job. Now, this next piece here, all right, so this was from the Wall Street Journal. It's about the question, is Trump trying to destroy Harvard? I would say no. I would say he's trying to stop Harvard from destroying itself. So that's the point to consider. So yes, as some people relate, the leadership of Harvard in the back room with the doors closed are saying, oh my God, we've got problems like we don't know what to do with. It looks like our endowment's going to get taxed. We're going to lose our tax-exempt status. We're going to have investigations from the Department of Justice and Homeland Security, and God knows what else is coming. And none of this makes you look good, Harvard. And oh, by the way, I forgot. People have to be reminded that Harvard has gotten into a new business now. The new business that Harvard is in, they're teaching high school math classes. That's right. They're teaching high school math classes. I'm sure I believe it's called college remediation. So that's high school students who should have learned certain things to be ready for college. They show up, and lo and behold, they're not ready. So we're going to go back and do it again. Let us understand the idiocy of this, the sheer, unbelievable, galling idiocy. Please, please, please. Harvard, one of the most selective schools in the world. Okay, most selective. They supposedly pick out the best students. And these kids show up at their door, and these best students are what? They're not ready to do math at a college level. The best. What a joke. What a joke. And so how does that make Harvard look? Boy, you really know how to pick a bunch of winners, don't you? You get kids in there you think are the right choice, and they can't even do math. You're a bunch of idiots. So yeah, Trump is trying to save you from destroying yourself, okay? So there's that, and is Harvard corrupt? Oh my God, is Harvard corrupt? There was an article basically saying that the way that Harvard goes about suppressing, shall we say, dissident professors, shockingly like the way Stalin handled his dissidents. Meantime, we'll move on to the next big story. The horrible tragedy of this young couple that was shot to death right there in the, was it an embassy? Outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. Okay, so I just want to get to the main point. The person who shot them is a very messed up individual. Okay, alleged DC shooter Elias Rodriguez was once associated with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which has run a presidential candidate every year since 2008. Them and the Answer Coalition are both linked to the People's Forum, which has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. So a little something to keep in mind. It's just, so yes, I mean the sense, for what it's worth in the media, is that they've gone too far. All these people who have a problem with Israel have gone too far. And you have someone come out and murder a young couple like that in cold blood, you've gone too far. So then I have a follow-up article for this, Violent Leftist Strike Again by J.B. Shirk. I want you to go read that for sure. Now, the other part that's interesting here is that Rudy Giuliani, you know, he's had a really rough journey for the last 4 years, let's face it. I'm in the camp that says he's been treated very unfairly, and that's putting it mildly. He may be down, but he's not out. So here we find that at the right time, let me just suggest that, at the right time, Giuliani may be appointed as special prosecutor to go after the Biden crime family. As he points out, you've got up to 8 different conspiracies or crimes. And one of Mr. Giuliani's feathers in his cap is he has successfully prosecuted RICO cases. Okay, so he's going to bring the RICO statutes to this little operation as well. And then hopefully this will open up a whole bunch of other things to show the interactions, to put it mildly, with communist China. Meantime, I need to, to people who are not from the Connecticut area, there's a town. The town is called Guilford, Connecticut. And I need to point out that Guilford, Connecticut is a hot spot for communist activity. And it just so happens that it's also a bedroom community for Yale University. Not the only one, but it's a big one. Now, a friend of mine who was there during the hands-off rallies that they had back in April noted that there were at least 1,000 people in the green there in Guilford screaming hands off. As I listened to this, I realized the proper title for all of this is hands off my communist takeover, all right? Because when you look at the things they were complaining about, here we go. So these are some of the things that they were saying. Hands off our immigrants. Hands off Social Security, Medicare. Hands off the post office, the VA, the EPA, the schools, union rights, civil rights. Well, these are a lot of things that the communists have taken control of in this. Oh, I'm sorry, progressives. I gotta watch that. But the fact of the matter was, we have a record that shows clearly that this event, this hands-off rally, was sponsored by Communist Party USA, not to mention that they have their finance office in New Haven. So, should we be surprised, okay, if we try to tell you that this is a communist movement, hence the title, Hands Off My Communist Takeover. So check it out. This also, by the way, is from the Connecticut Sentinel, who continue to do great work. And speaking of great work, Marco Rubio. All right, so apparently within the four walls of the State Department, we have the National Security Council. There are 350 people on this. This is considered one of these cushy, I'm going to say it, do-nothing jobs, even though it sounds fancy, National Security Council. So Marco Rubio said, 100 of you guys are out of here. Out of here, all right? And it's considered another sort of sinecure for the deep state. So the fact that you got rid of a third of them is a start. And but you know, this comes back to the argument that if something like the National Security Council really does have a legitimate role to play, then it should be defined statutorily, and what they do should only be what's been defined statutorily. This is the same situation that Kari Lake has had with the Voice of America. All these programs that are overgrown over the original mission of the Voice of America. All right, so now I just want to get to Tina Peters. Everybody, the governor, Polis, Colorado needs to know we're not buying your crap. And the federal government, Pam, hello, Pam, I'm trying to get your attention. Hey, Pam, you got to get those federal witnesses going. Hurry up, this isn't working. And for all you people who are fans of Connecticut, there's an article also from the Connecticut Sentinel by Bob Swick, highly recommended, that he has a great summary on all the things that are wrong with the Connecticut state government. Look, this is the thing about Connecticut. It's a case study in what happens when you have 40 plus years of one-party rule, which is effectively what we've had. The fact that we had a Republican governor for a few years is irrelevant. And all the things that have happened since, let's say, 2012, just shows how bad it can get. So, the constant legal drug problem, sickening excessive promotion of the harm and exploitation of children, the state takeover of local zoning laws, abandoning the fiscal guardrails, no acknowledgement whatsoever of the $100 to $150 billion of short and long-term liabilities and unfunded liabilities weighing on the state. A state ethics department that one would call a joke. I mean, it goes on. No, it's a serious mess, and the Republican Party is in no shape to deal with it, okay? So then I just want to mention also this article. It's a contrary view. So the argument in this article from the Sacramento Bee is that Republicans are exploiting anti-Semitism rather than dealing with it. And I would disagree. So I got two last things here. Yeah, two last things and a special note. Okay. We're going to start now. Food additive of the week. This is our salute to Maha. Yaha, Maha. Okay, this week we're going to talk about polysorbate 80. So, very quickly, polysorbate 80 is called an emulsifier. There's another name for an emulsifier. That is soap. You might have heard of it. So it turns out that these emulsifiers can upset the balance of bacteria in your gut. It has not been evaluated seriously, and which leads me to my next comment here. See if I can find it. Hold on. Oh, yes. Okay. Polysorbate 80, invented in the 1940s. It was originally a research reagent, but then it was found to have, quote, use in the food industry. And it went under the category of what's called GRAS. GRAS is an acronym that stands for Generally Regarded as Safe. Well, food dyes are GRAS. And guess what the first thing Secretary Kennedy attacked? That's right, food dyes. Even though they're GRAS, they have suspicious issues. The problem with GRAS is it's an exemption from doing the serious kind of testing that would show any kind of ill effects. So I am suggesting that we have a new safety standard in the food industry, and this new safety standard is also called GRAS, generally regarded as suspicious. Okay? So all those things that are generally regarded as safe must now be regarded as suspicious. So that's my thought for the day with that. And I want to bring your attention. This is my payoff here, ladies and gentlemen. I have noticed now at least two accounts where people are looking at China and they're beginning to wonder, is China really all that? So let's just start with this one here. Well, there are three things, just quickly. The first was these guys who decided to analyze satellite data that looks at the amount of light on the Earth at night. And they found that they could correlate the amount of light you could see out of a country with their economic activity. And China was emitting a lot less light at night than its economic activity would suggest. And there was the suggestion that the amount of activity based upon the light was 1/3 less than what they were claiming. So there's that. Meantime, here we have someone else suggesting that the headline is, China is hardly the economic juggernaut that many Western analysts believe. All right, so they have their analysis. The third one and last one, I wish I had the link for it. This is a little extreme, okay? But the argument, here's the take-home message. This other group doing their analysis wishes to suggest that the population of China may be as low as 300 million people. Not 1.4 billion, not 1.2 billion, not 900 million, 300 million. And the way they get there is through analysis of a lot of different things, such as when COVID hit, a huge number of cell phones were no longer used, like over 20 million. Then there was the activity with all the crematoria suddenly popping up all over the place and the ways in which they're mismanaged because they're so overloaded. So there's that and other data that they compiled, which you could call indirect, and nothing the Chinese government would ever admit to. But when you compile all that data, they're saying in the call it the worst case or best case, China's population could be dramatically lower than we think. Hopefully we'll get more truth on this. And on that happy note, next week.